The FIM Road Racing World Championship Grand Prix is the premier class of motorcycle road racing, held since 1949. Grand Prix motorcycles are purpose-built racing machines that are neither available for purchase by the general public nor able to be ridden legally on public roads. This contrasts with the various production-based categories of racing, such as the Superbike World Championship and the Isle of Man TT races that feature modified versions of road-going motorcycles available to the public. The championship is currently divided into three classes: MotoGP, Moto2 and Moto3. All three classes use four-stroke engines. In 2010, 250cc two-strokes were replaced by the new Moto 2600cc four-stroke class. In 2012, 125cc two-strokes were replaced by the Moto 3250cc four-stroke class with a weight limit of 65 kg with fuel, and the engine capacity for MotoGP increased from 800cc to 1000cc. Previously, the championship featured a 50cc two-stroke class from 1962 to 1983, an 80cc from 1984 to 1989, a 350cc two-stroke class from 1949 to 1982, and a 750cc class from 1977 to 1979. Overview. AFIM Road Racing World Championship Grand Prix was first organized by the Fédération Internationale de Motocyclisme in 1949. The commercial rights are now owned by Dorna Sports, with the FIM remaining as the sports sanctioning body. Teams are represented by the International Road Racing Teams Association and manufacturers by the Motorcycle Sport Manufacturers Association. Rules and changes to regulations are decided between the four entities, with Dorna casting a tie-breaking vote. In cases of technical modifications, the MSMA can unilaterally enact a veto changes by unanimous vote among its members. These four entities compose the Grand Prix Commission. There have traditionally been several races at each event for various classes of motorcycles based on engine size, and one class for sidecars. Classes for 50cc, 80cc, 125cc, 250cc, 350cc, and 500cc solo machines have existed at some time, and 350cc and 500cc sidecars. Up through the 1950s and most of the 1960s, four-stroke engines dominated all classes. In part this was due to rules, which allowed a multiplicity of cylinders and a multiplicity of gears. In the 1960s, two-stroke engines began to take root in the smaller classes. In 1969, the FIM, citing high development costs for non-works teams, brought in new rules restricting all classes to 6 gears and most to 2 cylinders. This led to a mass walkout of the sport by the previously highly successful Honda, Suzuki and Yamaha manufacturer teams, skewing the results tables for the next several years, with MV Agusta effectively the only works team left in the sport until Yamaha and Suzuki returned with new two-stroke designs. By this time, two-strokes completely eclipsed the four-strokes in all classes. In 1979, Honda, on its return to GP racing, made an attempt to return the four-stroke to the top class with the NR500, but this project failed, and in 1983, even Honda was winning with a two-stroke 500. The 50cc class was replaced by an 80cc class, then the class was dropped entirely in the 1990s, after being dominated primarily by Spanish and Italian makes. The 350cc class vanished in the 1980s. Sidecars were dropped from World Championship events in the 1990s, reducing the field to 125s, 250s, and 500s. MotoGP, the premier class of GP motorcycle racing, has changed dramatically in recent years. For the mid-1970s through to 2001, the top class of GP racing allowed 500cc displacement with a maximum of 4 cylinders, regardless of whether the engine was a 2-stroke or 4-stroke. Consequently, all machines were 2-strokes, due to the greater power output for a given engine capacity. Some 2- and 3-cylinder 2-stroke 500s were seen, but though they had a minimum weight advantage under the rules, typically attained higher corner speed and could qualify well, they lacked the power of the 4-cylinder machines. In 2002, rule changes were introduced to facilitate the phasing out of the 2-strokes. The rules permitted manufacturers to choose between running 2-stroke engines of 500cc or less or 4-strokes of 990cc or less. Manufacturers were also permitted to employ their choice of engine configuration. Despite the significantly increased costs involved in running the new 4-stroke machinery, given their extra 490cc capacity advantage, the 4-strokes were soon able to dominate the 2-stroke rivals. As a result, by 2003 no 2-stroke machines remained in the MotoGP field. The 125cc and 250cc classes still consisted exclusively of 2-stroke machines. In 2007, the MotoGP class had its maximum engine displacement capacity reduced to 800cc for a minimum of 5 years. For the 2012 season, the capacity has increased again to 1000cc. The 2008 racing calendar consisted of 18 rounds in 15 different countries. Exclusive to the MotoGP class, there was also a U.S. round at Mazda Raceway Laguna Seca in Monterey, California, for the 800cc class only. This was because the paddock was not large enough to also include the other two classes. In 2008, a MotoGP event was held at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first time on a newly prepared track. All three classes were scheduled to race, but severe wind and rain prevented the 250cc class from racing. MotoGP racing at Indianapolis is counterclockwise, with a snake pit complex past the start-finish line before heading down the turn 1 short chute and into the infield section. The grid is composed of 3 columns and contains approximately 20 riders. Grid positions are decided in descending order of qualifying speed, with the fastest on the pole a first position. Races last approximately 45 minutes. Each race is a sprint from start to finish without pitting for fuel or tires. In 2005, a flag-to-flag rule for MotoGP was introduced. Previously, if a race started dry and rain fell, officials could red flag the race and either restart or resume on wet tires. Now, when rain falls, a white flag is shown, indicating that riders can pit to swap the motorcycle on which they started the race for an identical one, as long as the tires are different. Besides different tires, the wet weather bikes have steel brake rotors and different brake pads instead of the carbon discs and pads used on the dry bikes. This is because the carbon brakes need to be very hot to function properly, and the water cools them too much. The suspension is also softened up somewhat for the wet weather. When a rider crashes, truck marshals up the track from the incident wave yellow flags, prohibiting passing in that area. 1 corner farther up the track, a stationary yellow flag is shown. If a fallen rider cannot be evacuated safely from the track, the race is red flagged. Motorcycle crashes are usually one of two types: low side, with the rider initially following his upended bike, and the more dangerous high side, with the rider ejected ahead of the machine. Increased use of traction control has made high sides much less frequent. According to one estimate, leasing a top-level motorcycle for a rider costs about $3 to $3.5 million for a racing season. As a result of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, MotoGP is undergoing changes in an effort to cut costs. Among them are reducing Friday practice sessions, banning active suspension, launch control and ceramic composite brakes, extending the lifespan of engines, and reducing testing sessions. Chronology: 1949, start of the World Championship and Grand Prix motorcycle racing. Harold Daniel wins the first ever 500cc Grand Prix race held at the Isle of Man TT. 1951, sidecars reduced in engine capacity from 600cc to 500cc. 1957, Gilera, Mondial and Moto Guzzi withdraw at the end of the season, citing increasing costs. Bob McIntyre wins the longest ever Grand Prix race of 301.84 miles, held over 8 laps of the Isle of Man. 1958, MV Agusta win the Constructors and Riders Championships in all 4 solo classes. 1959, MV Agusta retain all 8 solo titles. Honda enters the Isle of Man TT for the first time. 1960, MV Agusta retain all 8 championships again. 1961, the 1961 Argentine Grand Prix is the first World Championship race held outside of Europe. 1962, first year of the 50cc class. 1963, the 1963 Japanese Grand Prix is the first World Championship race held in Asia. 1964, the 1964 United States Grand Prix is the first World Championship race held in North America. 1966, Honda wins the Constructors' Championship in all 5 solo classes. Jim Redman wins Honda's first ever 500cc Grand Prix at Hockenheim, also the first win for a Japanese factory in the Premier class. 1967, final year of unrestricted numbers of cylinders and gears. Honda withdraws in protest. 1968, Giacomo Agostini wins both the 350cc and 500cc titles. 1969, Godfrey Nash riding a Norton Manx becomes the last rider to win a 500cc Grand Prix riding a single-cylinder machine. 1970, as 1968. 1971, Jack Findlay rides a Suzuki TR500 to the first ever win in the 500cc class for a 2-stroke machine. 1972, as 1968. The death of Gilberto Paletti at the Isle of Man TT causes multiple world champion Giacomo Agostini and other riders to boycott the next 4 events on grounds of safety. 1972, last year of 500cc sidecars. 1972, Giacomo Agostini wins his 7th consecutive 500cc championship, all with MV Agusta. 1973, deaths of Giano Saranen and Renzo Pasolini at the Italian round at Monza. 1974, the Suzuki RG500 is the first square 4 in the 500cc class. The Constructors' title is won by a Japanese brand and a 2-stroke for the first time. 1975, Giacomo Agostini wins the 500cc class. Yamaha was the first non-European brand to win the Riders' Championship. 1976, Barry Sheene wins the first 500cc championship for Suzuki. After the 1976 Isle of Man TT, the FIM gives in to the riders' boycott and removes the event from the Grand Prix calendar. 1977, Barry Sheene wins the 500cc class. The British Grand Prix moves from the Isle of Man to the Silverstone circuit on the British mainland. 1978, Kenny Roberts wins the 500cc class, the first American to do so. 1979, as 1978, 1980, as 1978. Patrick Pons and Malcolm White are both killed in the British GP at Silverstone. 1982, Jock Taylor is killed at the Finnish Sidecar GP. A matter is subsequently removed from the GP calendar. 1982, last year of 350cc class. 1983, Freddie Spencer wins the 500cc class. Spencer and Kenny Roberts win all 500cc races for the season between them. 1984, Michelin introduces radial tires in GPs. 1984, 50cc class uprated to 80cc. 1987, push starts are eliminated. 1988, Wayne Rainey wins the first 500cc race using carbon brakes at the British GP. 1988, Alfred Heck is killed during free practice in the French Sidecar GP. 1989, Ivan Palatzis is killed in 250cc German GP at Hockenheim. 1989, last year of 80cc class. 1990, 500cc grid switches from 5 to 4 bikes per row. 1992, Honda introduces the NSR 500 with a Big Bang engine. 1993, Shinichi Ito and his fuel-injected NSR 500 break the 200 mph barrier at the German GP at Hockenheim. 1993, Nobuyuki Wakai is killed during the practice session of the 250cc GP in Spain. 1993, three-time 500cc champion and then title holder Wayne Rainey is paralyzed following a crash at Misano. 1994, Simon Pryor, passenger of Yoshisada Kumagaya on an LCR ADM, is killed in a crash involving 7 outfits in the Sidecar GP at Hockenheim. 1998, 500cc switch to unleaded fuel. 1998, Mick Doohan wins his 5th consecutive 500cc title, all with Honda. 2001, Valentino Rossi wins his first Premier Class title and becomes the final 2-stroke champion in the Premium Series. 2002, Motage replaces the 500cc class. 990cc 4-strokes can now race alongside 500cc 2-strokes. 2003, Ducati makes its Grand Prix debut in the new 4-stroke Motage class. 2003, Daijiro Kato is killed during the Japanese GP in the Motage class at Suzuka when he hits the barrier at 340 r. 2004, Motage grid switches from 4 to 3 bikes per row while 250cc and 125cc classes retains 4 bikes per row in 2004 beyond. 2004, Makoto Tamada earns Bridgestone the first Motage victory at the Brazilian GP. 2005, Motage adopts flag-to-flag rule, allowing riders to pit and switch to bikes fitted with wet weather tires and continue if rain begins to fall mid-race. 2005, Valentino Rossi wins his 5th consecutive Motage title. 2007 Motage engine capacity is restricted to 800cc 4 strokes. Ducati wins the Riders' Championship with Casey Stoner and constructor title, the first European brand to do so in the Premier class in 30 years. 2008 Motage runs its first night race in Qatar. 2008 Dunlop drops out of Motage. 2009 Michelin drops out of Motage and Bridgestone becomes the sole tyre provider. 2010 Moto2 replaces the 250cc GP2 stroke class. All engines are built for Moto2 by Honda and a 4-stroke 600cc inline 4-cylinder producing 125 bhp and rev up to 16,000 revolutions per minute. 2010 Moto2 rider Shouta Maezawa is killed at Misano. 2010, for the first time, Spain hosts 4 Grand Prix in a single year. 2011, Motage rider Marco Simoncelli is killed at Sepang. 2011, Suzuki withdraws from Motage at the end of the season. 2012, Moto 3250cc 4-stroke single-cylinder class replaces the 125cc 2-stroke class. 2012, Motage raises the maximum engine capacity to 1000cc and introduces claiming rule teams. 2013, knockout qualifying style is introduced. 2013, Marc Marquez becomes the first rookie to win the championship in MotoGP's current guise. 2014, removal of the claiming rule teams and introduction of the open class category. Marc Marquez dominates the season by winning the first 10 races of the season. 2015, Suzuki returned to Motage as a constructor after a 4-year hiatus. 2016, Michelin returns as tyre supplier after Bridgestone's withdrawal. 2016, Luis Salom dies during Moto2 practice at the Catalan Grand Prix after a high-speed impact with his own stricken bike. Riders. Top riders travel the world to compete in the annual FIM World Championship Series. The championship is perhaps most closely followed in Italy and Spain, home of many of the more successful riders early in the 21st century. As for the 2011 season, 25 riders of 8 nations participated in the Premier class of the championship. Champions. The Riders' World Championship is awarded to the most successful rider over a season, as determined by a points system based on Grand Prix results. Giacomo Agostini is the most successful champion in Grand Prix history, with 15 titles to his name. The most dominant rider of all time was Mike Hailwood, winning 10 out of 12 races in the 250cc class in the 1966 season. Mick Doohan, who won 12 out of 15 of the 500cc races in the 1997 Grand Prix motorcycle racing season, also deserves an honorable mention. Valentino Rossi is the most successful contemporary rider, having won 9 titles including 6 MotoGP titles, and 1 each at 500cc, 250cc and 125cc levels. The current champion is Jorge Lorenzo. Motage circuits. The Motage 2016 season consisted of races at 18 circuits in 14 different countries. Qatar, Doha, Losail International Circuit, Argentina, Autodromo Termas de Rio Hondo, United States, Austin, Circuit of the Americas, Spain, Jerez de la Frontera, Circuit de Jerez, France, Le Mans, Circuit Bugatti, Italy, Scarperia, Mugello Circuit, Spain, Montmello, Circuit de Catalunya, Netherlands, Assen, TT Circuit Assen, Germany, Chemnitz, Sachsenring, Austria, Spielberg, Red Bull Ring, Czech Republic, Brno, Maastricht Circuit, United Kingdom, Silverstone Circuit, San Marino, Rimini, Misano World Circuit, Marco Simoncelli, Spain, Alcanas, Motorland Aragon, Japan, MotoGP, Twin Ring MotoGP, Australia, Phillip Island Grand Prix Circuit, Malaysia, Sepang Circuit, Spain, Valencia, Circuit Ricardo Tormo. Specifications. The following shows the key specifications issues for each class. It was also introduced for the 2005 year that under Rule 2.10.5, no fuel on the motorcycle may be more than 15 degrees Celsius below ambient temperature. The use of any device on the motorcycle to artificially decrease the temperature of the fuel below ambient temperature is forbidden. No motorcycle may include such a device. This stops an artificial boost gained from increasing fuel density by cooling it. Motage class. At the beginning of the new motage era in 2002, 500cc 2-stroke and 990cc 4-stroke bikes were specified to race. The enormous power advantage of the twice as large displacement 4-stroke engine over the half the size 2-stroke meant that by the following season, no 2-stroke bikes were racing. In 2007, the maximum engine capacity was reduced to 800cc without reducing the existing weight restriction. Motage class motorcycles are not restricted to any specific engine configuration. However, the number of cylinders employed in the engine determines the motorcycle's permitted minimum weight. The weight of the extra cylinders acts as a form of handicap. This is necessarily because, for a given capacity, an engine with more cylinders is capable of producing more power. If comparable bore-to-stroke ratios are employed, an engine with more cylinders will have a greater piston area and a shorter stroke. The increased piston area permits an increase in the total valve area, allowing more air and fuel to be drawn into the engine, and the shorter stroke permits higher revs at the same piston speed, allowing the engine to pump still more air and fuel with the potential to produce more power, but with more fuel consumption too. In 2004, motorcycles were entered with 3, 4 and 5-cylinder configurations. A 6-cylinder engine was proposed by Blatter, but it did not reach the motage grids. Presently 4-cylinder engines appear to offer the best compromise between weight, power, and fuel consumption, as all competitors in the 2009 series use this solution in either V or inline configuration. In 2002, the FIM became concerned at the advances in design and engineering that resulted in higher speeds around the racetrack. Regulation changes related to weight, amount of available fuel and engine capacity were introduced. The amended rules reduced engine capacity to 800cc from 990cc and restricted the amount of available fuel for race distance from 26 liters in year 2004 to 21 liters in year 2007 and onwards. In addition, the minimum weight of 4-cylinder bikes used by all participating teams was increased by 3 kilograms. The highest speed for a motage motorcycle in 125cc category is 249.76 kilometers per hour by Valentino Rossi in 1996 for Aprilia, and the top speed in the history of motage is 361 kilometers per hour, set by Andrea Dovizioso during the warm-up at the 2016 Qatar Grand Prix. On December 11, 2009, the Grand Prix Commission announced that the motage class would switch to the 1000cc motor limit starting in the 2012 season. Maximum displacement was limited to 1000cc, maximum cylinders were limited to 4, and maximum bore was capped at 81 mm. Carmelo Ezpeleta, the CEO of Dorna Sports, indicated that the projected changes were received by the teams favorably. From 2012, teams not entered by one of the major manufacturers could seek claiming rule team status. Claiming rule team were intended to allow independent teams to be competitive at a lower cost and increase the number of entries in MotoGP. Claiming rule teams benefited from less restrictive rules on the number of engines that could be used in a season, and with larger fuel allowances during the races. Under the claiming rule, CRTs agree to allow up to 4 of their engines per season to be claimed after a race by one of the major manufacturer teams at a cost of €20,000 each including transmission, or €15,000 each for the engine alone. From the 2014 season, the court class was dropped in favor of an open class specification, allowing teams using the Control ECU hardware and software certain benefits, to increase the competitiveness. Moto2 class. Moto2 is the 600cc 4-stroke class, launched in 2010 to replace the traditional 250cc 2-stroke class. Engines are supplied exclusively by Honda, tires by Dunlop, and electronics are limited and supplied only by FIM-sanctioned producers with a maximum cost set at €650. Carbon fiber brakes are banned and only steel brakes are allowed. However, there are no chassis limitations. From 2010 onwards, only 600cc 4-stroke Moto2 machines have been allowed. Moto3 class. The 125cc class was replaced in 2012 by the Moto3 class. This class is restricted to single-cylinder 250cc 4-stroke engines with a maximum bore of 81 mm. The minimum total weight for motorcycle and rider is 148 kg. Riders in the Moto3 class cannot be older than 28 years, or 25 years for new contracted riders participating for the first time, and wild cards. Engine specifications. Weights. In 2005, fuel tank capacity was reduced by 2 liters to 24 liters. In 2006, fuel tank capacity was reduced by a further 2 liters to 22 liters. From 2007 onwards, and for a minimum period of 5 years, FIM has regulated in MotoGP class that 2-stroke bikes will no longer be allowed. The maximum fuel capacity is to be 21 liters. From 2007 to 2011, engines were limited to 800cc 4-strokes. In 2012, engine displacement was increased to 1000cc. For the 2013 season, minimum weight was increased to 160 kg. For the 2015 season, minimum weight was decreased to 158 kg. Tires. Tire selection is critical, usually done by the individual rider based on bike feel during practice, qualifying and the pre-race warm-up laps on the morning of the race, as well as the predicted weather. The typical compromise is between grip and longevity. Softer compound tires have more traction, but wear out more quickly. Harder compound tires have less traction, but are more likely to last the entire race. Conserving rubber throughout a race is a specific skill winning riders acquire. Special Q or qualifying tires of extreme softness and grip were typically used during grid qualifying sessions until the use was discontinued at the end of the 2008 season, but they lasted typically no longer than 1 or 2 laps, though they could deliver higher qualifying speeds. In wet conditions, special tires with full treads are used, but they suffer extreme wear if the track dries out. In 2007, new MotoGP regulations limited the number of tires any rider could use over the practice and qualifying period, and the race itself. to a maximum of 31 tires per rider. This introduced a problem of tire choice versus weather that challenges riders and teams to optimize the performance on race day. This factor was greeted with varying degrees of enthusiasm by participants. Bridgestone had dominated in 2007, and Michelin riders Valentino Rossi, Nicky Hayden, Danny Pedrosa, and Colin Edwards all acknowledged shortcomings in Michelin's race tires relative to Bridgestone. Rossi, disappointed with and critical of the performance of his Michelin tires, switched to Bridgestones for 2008 and won the World Championship in dominant fashion. Pedrosa switched to Bridgestones during the 2008 season. In 2008, the rules were amended to allow more tires per race weekend, 18 fronts and 22 rears for a total of 40 tires. The lower number of tires per weekend was considered a handicap to Michelin riders. The only MotoGP team using Dunlop tires in 2007, Yamaha Tech 3, did not use them in 2008 but switched to Michelin. For 2009, 2010 and 2011, A-Spec tire supplier Bridgestone was appointed by the FIM. For the whole season, Bridgestone provided 4 different specifications of front tire, 6 of rear, and a single wet specification, with no qualifying specification. For each round, Bridgestone provided only 2 specifications for front and rear. Tires are assigned to riders randomly to assure impartiality. George Lorenzo has publicly supported the monotire rule. At the end of the 2015 season, Bridgestone withdrew as official tire supplier to MotoGP. Following a formal tender, French tire manufacturer Michelin became the official supplier for the 2016 season, and testing began in Aragon immediately after the end of the 2015 season. Motorcycle cost. MotoGP motorcycles are estimated to be worth approximately $2 million, although executives within MotoGP have deemed them priceless due in part that they are prototypes and cannot easily be replicated. Scoring system.